Barakata Yahweh, Barakata Yahawashi, Bahasham, Barakahakodash, Barakatum. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, glory, and infinite honors to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahawashi. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule and teach well, and peace and salutations to you sincere Akim out there, pushing this word in truth and sincerity to the four corners of the globe. May you brothers endure until the end. This is the brother Ra'aya with another video, and I'm going to start it off in Revelation chapter 17, verse 16. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. And the 10 horns is speaking of the European Union, beginning with the first 10 common markets of the European Union, back when it was known as the European Economic Community in the 1950s. And the beast is speaking of NATO, and the whore is talking about the United States of America, which is biblically known as Babylon the Great, as well as spiritual Sodom and Egypt, as pursuant to Revelation 11, verse 8. And them burning her with fire is speaking of America's European allies turning against her during World War III to ally themselves with Russia and her allies to altogether shoot 200 million nuclear missiles onto the United States of America, turning her into the biblical lake of fire from sea to shining sea, and then a desolate, uninhabitable wasteland afterwards. And in this video, I'll be profiling 2 articles from RT.com to show the continuing waning relationship between America and her European allies. And this has been an ongoing thing. Some examples include the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, where Russia would sell gas to European countries like France and Germany. The United States of America constantly tried to meddle in that deal to end it so that those European countries could buy their gas from the United States of America, which would be much more expensive than getting it from Russia. And then you've had the refugee crises, which have resulted from the Libyan civil war and the Syrian civil war. And then you've had this issue with the Iranian nuclear deal, with the United States of America and Israel wanting to end it. These European Edomite nations are getting sick of the United States of America constantly meddling in their political and economic affairs. And again, it's ultimately going to culminate in them turning against the United States of America, that whore, and burning her with fire, those nuclear missiles. But now I'm going to go to my first article on RT.com titled, France to return ambassador to Washington after Biden's call to Macron in wake of major military contract snub. The French ambassador to the U.S., recalled recently over the AUKUS row, will return to Washington next week, President Emmanuel Macron has announced after a phone call with his U.S. counterpart, Joe Biden. Biden phoned Macron on Wednesday to discuss last week's announcement of a new security pact between the U.S., UK, and Australia. And the UK and Australia are also going to turn against the United States of America during World War III and ally themselves with Russia, along with France. And France is a part of the EU, the 10 horns, as well as the beast, NATO, which resulted in France losing a multi-billion-dollar shipbuilding contract, among other things, and agreed that the situation would have benefited from open consultations among allies on matters of strategic interest to France and our European partners, according to a joint statement released by both the White House and the Élysée Palace. Biden conveyed his ongoing commitment to such consultations, the statement said. So the other week, France had taken its ambassador to the United States of America out of the U.S. back to France over the AUKUS deal, which saw the U.S. planning to sell nuclear-powered submarines to Australia, which, as it just said, caused France to lose a multi-billion-dollar shipbuilding contract because France had already done a deal with Australia to sell them regular submarines. And while France has cooled down and is talking about sending its ambassador back to the United States of America, this has definitely left a black eye on their relationship. And it's gonna lead to the 10 horns upon the beast, hating that whore and burning her with fire. The two presidents will meet at the end of October in Europe in order to reach shared understandings and maintain momentum in this process. The French ambassador, recalled to Paris for consultations on Friday, will return to Washington next week per Macron's decision, the statement said, where he will start intensive work with U.S. officials. According to the joint statement, Biden reaffirms the strategic importance of France and European engagement in the Indo-Pacific region, and also recognizes the importance of a stronger and more capable European defense that contributes positively to the transatlantic and global security and is complementary to NATO. Paris has called for a review of the concept of alliances after France was caught completely off guard by last week's announcement. The first major project of the AUKUS is to provide Australia with nuclear-powered submarines, with Canberra canceling the contract with the French shipbuilder for a dozen conventional vessels originally signed in 2016. Speaking in New York on Monday, French Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian described the announcement as more than just a breach of a weapons contract, but a breach of confidence between allies, and called for serious reflection among Europeans on the very concept that we have of alliances and partnerships. Defense Minister Florence Parly told the French Senate on Wednesday that France intends to remind the U.S. that NATO's purpose is transatlantic security, not confrontation with China. France and Germany are now working to revise the strategic concept of the alliance by the 2020 summit in Madrid, she added. Being allies does not mean being hostage to the interests of another, Parly told the senators. France and Germany are now working to revise the strategic concept of the alliance. It's all going to culminate in them during World War III allying themselves with Russia to shoot those 200 million nuclear missiles onto the United States of America. Now I'm going to go to my next article titled, New American-led Cold War conflict with Russia and China has already begun. Majority of EU citizens believe, bombshell new poll. So as we read from the first article on RT.com, you've got the heads of state in these different European nations losing confidence in their alliance with the United States of America. And as we'll see in this article, you've got the average everyday European Edomite citizen losing confidence in their country's relationship with the United States of America. This relationship between the United States of America and her European allies is failing on all fronts. The U.S. is now locked into a new cycle of showdowns and suspicions with both Moscow and Beijing, while Brussels already risks being drawn into the rift, a majority of EU citizens believe, according to a major new research report. The study released on Wednesday by the European Council on Foreign Relations found that the vast majority of more than 16,000 respondents living in the bloc's member states believe relations between the East and West are under serious strains. Around 59% of those surveyed from across 12 countries, including France, Germany, Italy, Poland, Austria, and Spain, said that a new Cold War is already afoot between the U.S. and Russia, the two main players during World War III. However, closer to home, only 44% said that the EU had already been pulled into the conflict, and just 1 in 4 believed that a state of hostile relations exists between Moscow and their own capitals. Only in Poland and France did a majority of respondents say the geopolitical woes were actually affecting their own country, with the rest saying they were being fought by the bigger players. So as we can see from the European Edomites tallied in this poll, a lot of them believe that a new Cold War is brewing between the United States of America and Russia and China, and that their countries are going to get pulled into it. And that's another reason why these European nations are going to turn against the United States of America, because when the United States of America and the State of Israel foment a war with Iran, which is going to play into the bigger battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat in the Middle East, the War of Armageddon, they're going to get dragged into it on the side of the United States of America, and they don't want a war with Iran. These European Edomites have been the ones heavily pushing for the Iranian nuclear deal to stay intact. So when World War III kicks off and they get dragged into it, they're going to eventually turn against the U.S. and ally themselves with Russia to burn that whore with nuclear fire. At the same time, the belief that a new Cold War had broken out between the U.S. and China was held by nearly 2/3 of all respondents, while only half that number felt the EU was in the same position. Just 1 in 6 thought their own country was coming up against Beijing. A higher number of those surveyed felt the supposed conflict between Brussels and Russia was more real than one with China. However, the verdict on America's potential success in the purported New World Order was unclear, given that very few believed Washington still has the power to dictate the global state of affairs. Asked who they believe has the most say over how the world is run, only 13% said the U.S. government. Hey, these European Edomites are losing confidence in their relationship with the United States of America. This is slightly fewer than 14% who said power is in the hands of a hidden network of global elites, or the 16% who named billionaires like Bill Gates, Charles Koch, and Mark Zuckerberg. I'm going to jump down to this paragraph. In July, former Kremlin advisor and leading Moscow academic Sergei Karaganov warned that a new Cold War is indeed on the cards, but he said Russia is already winning it. There are several factors that allow us to talk about good chances for success, the professor claimed. Moscow's newfound partnership with China, he said, means that the two countries can turn their focus exclusively to the West, rather than fighting between themselves as they did during the days of the Soviet Union. And Russia is going to win the new Cold War as well as World War III, because not only is Russia and its allies going to shoot nuclear missiles onto the U.S., but America's own allies, the 10 horns upon the beast, are going to turn against her and ally themselves to Russia to add to those 200 million nuclear missiles that are going to hit this whore and turn her into the biblical lake of fire from sea to shining sea and the desolate, uninhabitable wasteland afterwards. But now let's get to some precepts. This is Obadiah chapter 1, verse 7. All the men of thy confederacy, or your allies, have brought thee even to the border, the men that were at peace with thee, such as France, Germany, these other European Edomite nations, have deceived thee and prevailed against thee. They that eat thy bread, receive money for funding from NATO, have laid a wound under thee. There is none understanding in him. So as this verse says, all the men of thy confederacy, the allies of the United States of America that were at peace with her, will deceive her and prevail against her and lay a wound under her by allying themselves with Russia and her allies to shoot those 200 million nuclear missiles onto the United States of America. And as we saw from those articles on RT.com, the relationship between America and her European allies is waning more and more with each passing day. But now I'm going to go to Jeremiah chapter 50, verse 9. For lo, I will raise and cause to come up against Babylon, the United States of America, an assembly of great nations from the north country. And the north country is speaking of Russia, because what's north of the U.S., Canada, the Arctic Ocean region, and then Russia. And it's a well-known fact that Russia shooting its missiles from the north across the Arctic Ocean region to hit its targets in the United States of America would be the shortest trajectory time for its missiles to reach the U.S. And I've done videos on it in the past showing that Russia has been building up its military assets in that Arctic Ocean region. And that assembly of great nations is not only talking about Russia's allies like China, Iran, and North Korea, but also America's allies those 10 horns that thou sawest upon the beast, countries like Britain, France, Germany, and these other European nations that are going to turn against the U.S. during World War III and ally themselves with that North country, Russia, to shoot those nuclear missiles onto that whore and burn her with fire. And they shall set themselves in array against her. From thence she shall be taken. Their arrows shall be as of a mighty expert man. None shall return in vain. And those arrows are symbolically speaking of the nuclear missiles, because what you have to remember is that when the prophets saw these visions thousands of years ago, they didn't know what a modern day nuclear missile was, so they had to describe it the best way they could with what they knew during their times. Ancient weapons of war like bows and arrows, spears, lances, flying swords, etc., etc. And like I've been saying all throughout the video, after those nuclear missiles hit the United States of America, they're going to turn her into the biblical lake of fire from sea to shining sea, and then a desolate, uninhabitable wasteland afterwards. Now I'm going to jump down to verse 41. Behold, a people shall come from the north country, Russia, and a great nation, and many kings shall be raised up from the coasts of the earth, an assembly of nations unto the north country, not only Russia's allies, but America's own allies that are going to turn against her and ally themselves with that north country. They shall hold the bow and the lance, those nuclear missiles. They are cruel and will not shew mercy. Their voice shall roar like the sea, and they shall ride upon the horses, every one put in array like a man to the battle against thee, O daughter of Babylon, the virgin daughter of Babylon, that whore, the United States of America. Now I'm going to jump up to verse 40. As the Most High overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah and the neighbor cities thereof. And how did the Most High overthrow ancient Sodom and Gomorrah? With fire and brimstone from the sky. And he's going to overthrow this modern day Sodom and Gomorrah with modern fire and brimstone from the sky. Those 200 million nuclear missiles. And like I said at the beginning of the video, besides being known as Babylon the Great in the scriptures, the United States of America is also known as spiritual Sodom and Egypt, as pursuant to Revelation 11 verse 8. Saith Yahweh, so shall no man abide there, neither shall any son of man dwell therein. After those nuclear missiles hit the U.S. and turn her into the biblical lake of fire from sea to shining sea, when the dust settles, it's going to become that desolate, uninhabitable wasteland where no man, woman, or child will ever set foot on ever again. And only desert creatures will dwell here after a time, as it says up in verse 39. Therefore, the wild beasts of the desert with the wild beasts of the islands shall dwell there, and the owls shall dwell therein, and it shall be no more inhabited forever, neither shall it be dwelt in from generation to generation. And the former United States of America, Babylon the Great, spiritual Sodom and Egypt will stand as an eternal memorial as to what a wicked kingdom looked like, how not to govern the earth, and what the judgment and punishment was for afflicting the apple of the Most High's eye, the true children of Israel, who are the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. So that's it with this video. And with this video, I hope you sincere Akim are edified. Just keep strong and keep pushing this word. We're almost out of this final wicked captivity of the heathen nations, chiefly of the Edomites. And as always, I'm going to say Abad Babal, Kwam Yasharala, and until next time, Shalom.